a racing car sound. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of JDM Masters car reviews, and today we are in Lake Miyagase, and this is a national park located in the north part of Kanagawa Prefecture, and you can see here from the shots it's a beautiful view. You have the bridges running through, and it's also a great fishing spot. People come here for canoeing, and today we have a very unique Toyota Levin AE111, and we're going to be talking about this, so come join us. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the AE111 Corolla Levin. And as I said, this is the last iteration of the...
Oh my God.
Sprinter Trueno just pulled up. And this is actually the grandfather of this car. It's got the first version of the 4A-GE engine, and how nice for him to come and join us. So we have a perfect chance to talk about the history of the 4A-GE engine, and we're going to be comparing it and looking to this. こんぐらいの隙間できますか? はい。Okay, stop. 完璧. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the Corolla Levin. Now, as you all know, the name Corolla or Corolla in Japanese, which is actually a Spanish word, and it's based on the constellation. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm not very knowledgeable about it. But I do know that the Corolla had a coupe version, and this is the 7th and final generation of the Levin. Now, there's a little bit of a complication here. So let's take a little break from all that car action, and we're going to be talking a little bit about internet security. And this video today is sponsored by Surfshark. And so this is something that a lot of you may have heard about, called VPN. It's called Virtual Private Network. Now, what this essentially allows you to do is log on to the server of another country, another location, anywhere. It doesn't compromise your internet security. It's pretty simple. Now I'm going to try and connect to, let's see, United States, Dallas, and one click and we're in. It's really, really fast. But also this enables you to connect to maybe things like Netflix, where you can watch shows that are not available in the country that you're at. So you could be here in Japan, but you want to watch your favorite TV show back in America or in the UK, wherever you're from, and you can do so if you have this program. So if you're interested to try the Surfshark VPN, the link is in the description right below here, and you will get a 85% discount with our JDM Masters code. And furthermore, they offer 3 months free subscription, and you can get a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied. So have a look here. The car you see here on my left is called a Trueno. Now in Japan, very often there were 2 versions of basically the same car. They were sold in 2 different dealerships, and it was more like a sister car. And here we can see in this reference, HyperRev, that you have both of these Levin and Trueno. Of course, this is the very famous AE86 version. For those fans of Keiichi Tsuchiya's the Drift King, his car, and of course, Initial D. A lot of you car fans came into knowing JDM cars through Initial D, and we have a little reference even in this first book about Initial D. Here we are. So the iconic AE86, which is not really the same version. This is a 2-door coupe. The more popular 3-door hatchback, which is featured in popular manga and a lot of course, you know, if you watch Best Motoring Hot version, this car always comes out. However, today we're here to talk about the AE111, which is quite often the forgotten child or the forgotten generation of the entire Levin and Trueno series. But there's something really special and valuable about this car, and that's directly related to this. So let's talk a little bit about the AE111. So we have here the catalog of the AE111 Corolla Levin. And you can see here, this is the final facelifted version. You can see here the final edition BZR and the BZG. And so what we have here today is the BZ or BZG spec, not the BZR. The slight differences are that the BZR has the super stretch suspension, which is also the same carried over from the Celica ST202 and 205 generation, but they also put that super strut suspension into this model. But there's also a cheaper, simpler model without that super strut suspension, just a normal strut suspension, but also came without a helical LSD. But what makes this model really stand out from all of the other Toyota Corolla Levins is the engine. And as you can see here, right here at the top, the leather 20 valve 4A-GE is a 1.6 liter 4-cylinder engine, and it's the last of this particular generation. Now to talk about this engine, we've got to go a little back in history to this car's engine. Now what makes this generation also special is that it was the last to come with a rear-wheel drive configuration. In the same generation, they also had a front-wheel drive of a different design for the 4-door and the 2- and the 5-door hatchbacks. AE92 Levin Trueno after that became a front-wheel drive, as you can see from this reference photos. And then after that, the AE101 was the first to come with the 20-valve engine with VVT and also 4-throttle individual throttle bodies. And then finally the blacktop version in this AE111. Now there's a little trivia here. The AE111 actually doesn't only apply to this model with the 20 valve. The normal 1.6 without the high horsepower was also called the AE111. The name was also applied to the Corolla GT, which was the 4-door sedan model of this car. As you can see in reference photos over here, it basically looks like your retirees or a normal family sedan of that generation, but it had the same drivetrain and the 6-speed manual transmission. That's the car that's not really known. Let us know in the comments if you want us to review that car as well. And this engine also appeared in the wagon version of the AE101 and in the AE111 wagon version called the Sprinter Carib. And so in Japan, there were various iterations of it, which explains why there's a lot of these engines going around for transplant, usually into the AE86. And that is the exact spec or the form that appears in Takumi's AE86. AE86 engine, which is correctly called the 4A-GE, and also the 92 was called 4A-GE, and the 20 valve version, the full name is called the 4A-GELU, also the same here, and there's also a supercharged version for the 92 and the 101. Now all the horsepowers are varied, and as I explained earlier, here in the earlier version it was the gross horsepower, which takes power from the crankshaft. So in reality, it's a lot lower when put in the transmission. And from the late 80s onwards, they started to quote net horsepower, which is a more realistic measurement with all the accessories on. There wasn't much of an increase, it was 120, but this is where it starts to get a little interesting. From the AE101 generation, the cylinder head was designed in cooperation with Yamaha Motors, which Toyota has also worked with them a lot to design their sports engines in particular. Also the 3A-GE and the 1JZ GTE, and of course not forgetting some of the Lexus engines, especially on the LFA. But that Yamaha technology comes from their motorcycle history. And what makes this unique is it uses not 4 valves per cylinder, but actually 5 valves per cylinder. So that's 3 intake valves and 2 exhaust valves. Very tight squeeze over there, but the whole objective was to get as much air as possible into those cylinders. This actually comes from Yamaha's racing motorbike technology. This is the more interesting part of the car, which everyone seems to want to take that engine and put it in the rear-wheel drive AE86. Now, why do that? What's wrong with the front-wheel drive car? And we're going to explain to you in a little bit why maybe if you do want to buy one of these underrated classics, you should just keep it as it is. So let's talk a little bit about the basic design of the coupe Corolla Levin AE111. You can see from reference photos here how it's quite different from the 4-door sedan. The front mask is completely different in design, and so is the rear. The interior is also different, interestingly. On the facelifted version of the AE111 sedan Corolla, the dashboard design is more streamlined, but the interesting part about the AE111 coupe was that it is all bespoke parts. Now underneath it shares the same floor plan, the suspension components, and the same sort of low-level body line, which if you compare it, body line is still kept very low. The profile of both these cars are lowered, and we can also see how the smooth, long bonnet design sort of tapers into a sharp but very purposeful looking front mask. And it's not too different from the Trueno version of the Corolla. The Corolla Levin AE86 had a more square cut-off front, but with the Trueno's pop-up headlights, of course this is up now, imagine that please this is a straight line, there is a kind of similarity. It's like the same design language flowing through actually the final generation. Looking at reference photos of the AE101, it seems a bit more bubbleless, more kind of like rounded. But for the AE111, they made it a lot sharper, reminiscent of the AE86. Now going on to the back, it's a 2-door coupe. The inside interior, the roofline is kept really quite narrow, and coming down to the rear windscreen, it's really wide and tall. But also the angle of both the front and the rear isn't that much varied, unlike the DC2 Integra Type R, and if you look at the rear wing, the overall shape kind of looks very similar to the DC2 Integra Type R. Maybe this is on purpose, we're not sure, but it does suit the bodyline of the Levin very, very much. And what's interesting here is that if you look at the boot lid, very typical of 90s cars, how there's a sharp but very contoured angle coming down. You see this line here. All 90s cars have a prominent bumper that comes out. It's not flush like later models. And so this combination of a bumper, very contoured rear trunk, and the wing gives it that distinctive look, which is only possible of cars of that age. Line comes out, tapering from the rear of the car, and you can see 2 lines, and it's like a nicely chiseled diamond. Now you really have to come to this side to the rear to really appreciate how chiseled and streamlined this car is. The line goes all the way to the front. It's so high at the back and low in the front, which gives it a very aggressive sort of stance. Lowered a little bit, and design-wise, it really doesn't lose out to more popular cars like the Honda Civic or the Integra. What is different though is that the body size looks long, but the wheelbase is actually a lot shorter than the Civic Type R, the EK, which is in the same generation. So this car came out in 1995, which puts it at the same timeline as the EK Civic, which also came out in 1995. And it was on sale until 2000. And so it was the last of the 90s generation. The wheelbase of the Levin 111 is 2.4. Now, compared to the Civic and an Integra, the wheelbase of the Toyota Corolla is actually a lot shorter. At 2,465 millimeters, it's almost 20 millimeters shorter than the EK Civic EK4. That's quite typical of those 90s cars between 2.4 to 2.5, but it also means it gives it a more nimble and a more agile turn-in. The body width is also the Japanese 5-number classification, which puts it at a maximum of 1,700 millimeters wide, which means it's going to be very easy to park and go around in Japanese cities. Basic car was also sold in the lower end models with a bread and butter engine, 1.6 liter and also 1.5 liter, which a lot of normal people bought maybe as a grocery getter. But I don't know why you would buy a two-door as a grocery getter. But it's also interesting that in Japan, the AE111 now is quite underappreciated. Prices haven't really gone up that much. We mostly take it for the engine, but it's such a waste because the dynamics of the AE111 is actually pretty good. So let's talk about the 4A-GE engine, which is very famous in the world of JDM tuning. And of course, there's a lot of folklore, not only from Initial D, but also from Keiichi Tsuchiya's very famous car, which you see a lot on the internet. But also, the AE86 is well loved around the world as a lightweight sports car. And there's a lot of tuning parts for it. There's a lot of different configurations for tuning. So let's have a look at the basic technical specifications of the 4A-GE engine. It's an iron block, a small 4-cylinder with a 16-valve twin cam head. And the twin cam, or DOHC, was something that Toyota didn't really use that much in the 70s. Now, coming to the 80s, they had two different versions of twin cam engines. And if you look at the code here, Toyota's nomenclature of 4A, so it's the A series engine, and the 4 signifies the capacity size. Usually, as the numbers go down, the engine sizes go bigger. So 4, in this case, is a 1.6. But of interest are these two letters after the hyphen, the G and the E. The E stands for like with fuel injection, but the G is where it makes a difference. There is another engine called the 4A-FE. FE stands for the more economy style head. It was narrower in width, so the head is a lot smaller, but it's not tuned for horsepower. It's meant for fuel economy and better response in everyday driving. This FE engine was you find a lot in normal Corollas or Coronas in all over the world. But what we are interested in is why this GE head is very, very different. You find the GE in a lot of other sports engines as well, like the 3S-GE, the 2JZ, 1JZ, they're all GE engines. Now, some people say that the 4A-GE engine was derived from the Ford Cosworth BDA engine, which had very similar bore and stroke, and also it was an iron block. But in reality, it's quite different. The 4A-GE engine has a maximum size of 1.6 liters from the factory, and the BD engine was a maximum size of 2 liters. Quite different in size, although the thinking at that time was the same. Rubber belt driven twin cam head, which for the early 80s was sort of cutting edge technology. Now, twin cam is nothing really special. As we mentioned, the GE head is a lot bigger, which means the valve angles are wider in order to incorporate more flow of air in order to create more power. Now, this is before like Honda had VTEC or anything. The way to develop more horsepower and response from this engine was to use, first of all, a well-designed pent roof construction style cylinder head, the 16 valves, and this was also something that coming from the economy cars of the 80s used usually 12 valve. 16 valve was something that was reserved mainly for sports engines. The intake manifold of the AE86 uses a TVIS mechanism, which can vary the air flow length of the runners. And so it was a long ram, longer airflow for the lower end torque, and there's a butterfly valve which switches to a shorter path to introduce more power. Now, as much as it was advanced in the 1980s, you had a distributor, you had electronic fuel injection, which was also something quite revolutionary for 1983. Getting about 120 horsepower from this basic engine was quite revolutionary at that time. let's go to the last iteration, which is basically the same iron block, aluminum head. But what was the method that Toyota used in order to get more power from basically the 80s design? So here you can see that this is how the valve head cover should look like. The 80s car has got a different color, and is missing the valve head cover, which says twin cam 20. Now, believers, there are 20 valves in this engine, 3 for the intake. Now, coming from motorcycle technology, if you have an extra valve to introduce more air into the engine at a high velocity, you are going to create more power. But in order to supplement that, the engine needed to be in a higher state of tune, which meant coming from the silver top, a lot of things were different. The crankshaft, the pistons were better designed with higher compression. In fact, up to 11.0, which is very high for an NA engine. The Integra Type R DC2 B18C was 11.1. So very close to that. The cams were also more aggressive, lighter con rods. A lot of things in the internals were different. But starting from the AE111, the basic design was the same. Now, in order to make full use of the 5-valve technology to introduce more air, they had to create an air intake system different from the TVIS in order to give it much higher airspeed at higher RPMs. The more you can rev the engine to higher RPMs, the more top-end power you're going to get. While Honda had VTEC, Mitsubishi had Maybach in the 1.6 liter class using the Mirage, and even Pulsar VZR had a kind of double cam switching system. Toyota stuck to a conventional cam system, but they introduced this very expensive and costly component in order to draw more power. And if you look carefully here, you can see that this is actually an ITB, also known as individual throttle body. So this is one throttle body for each cylinder. If we quickly switch back, you can see mechanically how different it looks from a conventional engine which has only one throttle body. And you can see here, this is the wire that operates the single throttle. It goes into an intake plenum, and the runners flow into the intake side of the engine. Now let's go back here. You can see physically how different it is. Air filter is right here. You have the tube, and it goes into an intake plenum, and each cylinder has its own throttle body. In fact, if we move this, if I move the main mechanism, you can see that each cylinder's throttle is moving on its own. Why having an individual throttle body is better than a single throttle body? By having air going individually into each cylinder, there is an advantage of having better throttle response. Now, let's imagine this. When your throttle is closed in a normal single intake, there is no air going into the intake plenum. All the air that comes from the atmosphere goes and waits at the entrance of the throttle body. When it opens, all the air rushes in, and it has to fill all of the cylinders in a short time. And that does create a lag before it goes into the 4 cylinders. Of course, the travel path until the rearmost cylinder takes a little bit of time. But if you could have a throttle body on each of the individual cylinders, like 20 valve, there is no waiting at all. The response is immediate. It's because air is already at atmospheric pressure inside this intake plenum. The air gets sucked in here. There's no restriction here at all. It's just waiting at the entrance of each of these 4 cylinders. The moment the throttle is cracked open, all that air just rushes in, and it fills up the cylinders instantaneously. Now, it's because of this response which is needed, especially at higher RPMs, where everything is spinning really quickly, and you want to get in that air to fill up the cylinders in order to create that power as quickly as possible. And that is why this system is used mainly on racing engines or engines with a very high state of tune. And so, because the 20 valve technology with also VVT on the intake side of the cams also is able to help it vary the timing of the camshaft opening cycle. Now, VVT is a little bit different from VTEC, because VTEC has 2 cams, this is just 1 cam. The difference is that VVT was used to open it earlier at lower RPM so that it can get a little bit more torque. This is the way to balance low-end and mid-range torque with high-end power. Now, a little note about using full throttle. So if you think, well, okay, why not I just put an individual throttle body on any car? In order to get the full benefits of a full throttle or individual throttle body, the engine needs to be in a relatively high state of tune, which means aggressive cams, pistons, which give a very high compression in order to make use of that high flow characteristics that individual throttle bodies. I can't just slap it onto any engine without actually tuning it up a lot more. But it's quite a testament that how Yamaha is using their motorcycle technology to make, basically a road engine that gives, let's get this, 165 horsepower from an engine that doesn't have a VTEC mechanism. This is 1995, even earlier for the 101 version. Now let's have a look at this catalog specs. Now, another interesting thing about the 4A-GE's basic design, it's also very similar to the B16A with the bore size of 81.0 and a stroke of 77.0, the difference by 0.01. It's a short stroke engine, meaning there's less stress on the crankshaft, the lower piston speed, so it can rev higher without having a lot of stress. So the B16A and the Mitsubishi's Mirage engine developed its torque at almost 7,000 RPM, not too much difference from the peak power. But this is where the 4A-GE has a little bit of an advantage because it develops its peak torque at 5,600 RPM. It's 2,000 RPM lower, and you really feel it when you drive the car. That mid-range torque comes out nice and strong, although it does taper off a little bit towards the top end. Maybe it's a lot more easier to drive in daily traffic in a light toge or even on the circuit. So it's got a lot of similarities between the 16 valve. What makes the 20 valve special is that you didn't really need to do anything. You could get really good response and good torque, enough horsepower. And this is the reason why the 20 valve is a favorite swap into the AE86. So try to imagine this. Just try to imagine how this engine is just replaced inside here, and you could have reliable 160 horsepower in a rear-wheel drive car, and this was basically the initial formula. So let's talk a little bit about the drivetrain now. It's very conventional, strut suspension in the front and also strut suspension in the rear. With the front, there were two different versions. On the BZR, had the carryover from the Celica Super strut suspension. This was an original Toyota design to give it more active camber as it was going through the corner, mimicking a double wishbone suspension without actually redesigning the entire suspension system. There's a little curve that goes down from the bottom, a different lower arm to give it a slight camber characteristics as it's going to the corner. However, the super strut suspension is also very expensive as aftermarket parts, whether it's original or if you want to buy a coilover set, much more expensive than a conventional strut because it's more complicated. Now the car we have today is the slightly lower grade spec called the BZG, which comes with a conventional strut suspension. And the advantages of this is that it's a much lower cost to do upgrades, although the turning characteristics might not equal that of the super strut. The other problem with the super strut is that the lower arms bushes do need to be replaced at regular intervals, if not the system doesn't actually work. So some people actually preferred the regular version, which is why Toyota offered it in their range. At the same time, you could choose between these two, and if tuned properly and set up properly, it would not lose at all to other rivals like the Mitsubishi Mirage. Now the rear suspension, which we're going to take a look over here. Let's go under the car. So here we can see the rear subframe, and you can see two rods coming out. There's actually one at the back and one at the front. This is very similar to the setup of the Impreza WRX, which is also a rear strut suspension. And situated near the wheel is the trailing arm, and these are all rods. You can see the adjustment points. And you can see how long these arms are, which are usually very important for a strut suspension. Rather conventional design of the strut suspension may give the impression that it's not really going to handle well compared to, let's say, the double wishbone suspension of the Civic and Integra series. But on the AE111, the setup was proved to be very competitive in N1 racing. in the 1.6 liter class. In fact, it did a little bit better than the cheaper torsion beam design of the Nissan Sunny and Pulsar. The Mitsubishi Mirage also had a multi-link suspension, which is also very good for rally. The balance of the strut suspension went well with the body dimensions and the wheelbase. Tuning it is very, very easy. Managing camber setup and toe, it's very stiff. It was also a very popular car for amateur circuit racing back in the 90s and the early 2000s. In fact, you can still buy a lot of these parts for this car, and a lot of it's interchangeable even with the four-door sedan. The transmission for the later version that came out in 1997, they switched it from a 5-speed to a 6-speed in an FF body. I believe this was one of the first front-wheel drive 6-speeds to come out of Japan. Honda and Mitsubishi were still using 5-speeds. Went into the 2000 generation and everyone was basically using 6-speeds, but this was quite unique for the mid-90s generation 6-speed manual, which has good ratios from 1 to 4. Quite different from the Honda setup, where Toyotas usually have a longer ratio for better highway cruising. So 6 is not really used that much, but it suits the mid-range high torque characteristics of the 20 valve 4A-GE. Okay, now Beatty's car is not completely stock. We can see here that he has a Recaro seat actually taken out from Integra Type R DC2. It's black and the familiar red stitching. The passenger seat, however, is the original item. Sort of a semi-bucket design and that 90s pattern that looks a bit like the Le Mans Recaro. It makes an attempt to be quite supportive on the sides with the shape. It's actually quite soft. The rest of the interior, please excuse the little scruffiness. Here's a file photo of from the catalog, how it should look like. More or less the same. The interior is just a conventional 90s Corolla, which is similar to the 4-door version. On option, they even had actually a similar shaped SR3 Recaro with the Le Mans pattern. Same one they offered in the 80 Supra and also the ST205 Celica GT4. So that was an option. And here's the interior, and you can see how the gear shift knob looks like this, with a little aluminium plate in the center. Looks a little bit like the R34 GTR's design. The original steering wheel is exactly the same design as the Altezza and also the late version Supra. In fact, all of the Toyotas had this exact same steering wheel design, T-shape. The only differences were the trim on the side. But otherwise, it's a very simple, very Toyota 90s, good quality plastics, soft touch, and the controls are exactly where they should be. It's a front-wheel drive car. Headroom, of course, it's not that much. It's simple. Everything is where it should be. The controls of the aircon vents, the stalks, the gear shift position. It's not that low. In fact, it's a little bit higher than some of the Hondas of that generation. And the meters, the gauge over here, you can see it's orange only for the 20 valve version, and the red line is at 8,000 RPM. Now you look at this and you're sure that this has the 20 valve engine. Rear space, I'm going to try and get into that. Being slightly shorter than the saloon version, it's not bad at all. It's better than the R35 GTR, or actually even this 32 or the 34 GTR. As it is usual with some coupes, hip position of the cushions is lower. I'm 178 centimeters tall, and I hardly have space here. Head sort of hits on the rear windscreen like that. So I'm not going to want to ride in this car when my friend's going around the toge. I'm just going to sit like this. Actually, no, you know what? I'm not even going to sit in the rear at all. But there are two cup holders here which I can have. Why do you have two cup holders for one passenger? So hang on, I can have a mineral water and a little coffee at the same time, two passengers. There should be more cup holders in the front, don't you think? Not in the rear. This is something really interesting. You look here, it's an air purifier switch. Wow, I believe that was an option. Auto. high, low. And so that's supposed to be built into the air conditioner system. You know what, you see a lot of modern cars now, Lexuses have this, but it's funny to see how it appeared in the 90s basic Corolla. Wow. Anyway, yeah, it's a typical 90s car. Okay, so we are with Beatty, who is the owner of this AE111 Sprinter Trueno. Thanks for letting me review your car, Beatty.
By all means.
Actually, he's in our group. We're all a group of friends. We all go out to drive a lot, and you know, it's very rare to actually meet anyone with this car, even Japanese people. And something about Beatty, he loves Toyota. So tell me a little bit about your Toyota fascination, mate.
So my first car actually in Japan was a Altezza.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I really loved the car, and I had a great time with the first one. And then I decided I wanted to get another Altezza, a manual.
Oh, so the first was the automatic.
The first one was an RS200, the automatic variant.
Right.
Because I managed to get one for a really good deal at the time, and so that was my first purchase. But I loved the car so much, and I just realized that having it as automatic, I just felt like it just took away some of the pleasure from the car.
Definitely. It's a completely different experience.
Yeah. So that's why I got the manual variant, and I really love the Altezza, but I wanted something a bit more, you can say, like sport focused.
Okay. It's a little bit raw, right?
Right.
Lighter.
Like the Altezza is a great car, but it's a bit more on the luxury end, you know?
Right.
So I wanted to get something a bit more raw, as you said. So there's why I picked up the Levin.
So it had to be a Toyota, so like within that kind of like front wheel drive or like a high response engine.
Yes.
AE111 is the answer.
It is, and I'm also a big advocate for getting cars which are great in terms of price to performance ratios. You know, like I think as we mentioned earlier, the AE86 is also a great car, but in terms of like price to performance, in my opinion at least, it's a bit much. And for a person like me who's a university student, I'm not really able to have the budget to afford that. And I did some research, and it seemed like the AE111 was a great car for the price, and yeah, I haven't looked back since then.
I see. I mean, it's relatively inexpensive in the same class. Any Civic, SIR or Type R, they're way more expensive. But you're not getting, you know, a big difference in complete performance actually. The Levin doesn't really lose out, in my opinion, to the SIR. Maybe 15-20% less than the Type R. But what I love about the 4A-GE engine is its fat mid-range torque. It just picks up very, very well.
It's pretty fun, right?
Yeah. And the ratios for the second, third, fourth are really nicely suited for street driving. Oh my God! The sound! You guys can hear that in the tunnel. This is like a racing car sound. Even just for that sound, it's worth it. It's worth it. Let's have a look at the AE86. This particular example of this young car enthusiast, we had the opportunity to meet him right here as we're reviewing it. Immaculate condition. Word is overused a lot, but the condition of the interior, I've only seen one small little crack here. Usually AE86s of this age, the whole dashboard gets tattered and torn, cracked up. But this example is particularly in good condition, considering that it's never been restored at all, which means the previous owner, whoever it is, has kept this in this condition. Well, is this original? Look at this material on the roof, felt, and also on the wings.
Yeah,
The
panda design.
Yeah, the sort of panda design. You look at this 80s design, it has the just slow reaction. There's like 2 seconds delay. This is neutral position. It's neutral position slightly offset to the driver's side on the right. The first gear looks like it's straight. The other car that has this is the Altezza. Because the engineer for the 86 and Altezza is almost the same person.
Talk about electric window.
Now in the 1980s, like electric windows were an option, usually wind-up window. So it's quite rare to see still the original electric power window. The switch has just been like bolted onto the door trim. Very interesting.
Mirrors.
And yeah, even electric mirrors. Yeah, here, wow. Automatic air conditioning, auto mode. And you have the econ mode. That was also quite rare. And another interesting thing is this car was automatic before, so you have the power button and the manual function button. It was converted to a manual from automatic. That's probably one reason why it's in good condition. Probably that's the reason why. Low mileage, yeah. If you look at the rear, Toyota Sprinter Trueno seal, the decals is one piece. So this is definitely from the original car. You can't get these decals anymore because they just sold out. A lot of people who restore these cars actually have to get like cutting stickers, and it's just amazing. Even this wing was an option. It's original. It's not painted. Another interesting thing about the Panda color is this is painted, painted, not painted. So when people do the Panda color repaint, they sometimes paint this in black. It's not supposed to be painted, it's matte black. Mud flaps are also original, has the word Trueno down here. And you can also see the sticker here, one piece. Optional side skirt, optional front lower spoiler, but that lower spoiler apparently is from the Zenki version. RS Watanabe, iconic shape, of course, front wheels. What impresses me most is how clean this emblem is. There's no scratches whatsoever. The owner says this car, his inspiration was actually initially this final stage, the final battle between Takumi Fujiwara and Shinji Inui. It's the same Zenki two-door Sprinter Trueno GT Apex coupe that he uses, because everyone has the three-door and has Fujiwara Tofuten. So it's very nice to see the coupe version. Of course, the coupe version also has the advantage of having better body rigidity because it has a rear parcel shelf and rear firewall. Thank you for having me. Very nice car. AE86, wow. So guys, I had a chance to drive along in a AE86 Sprinter Trueno, but it's not a three-door, it's a two-door coupe, and it looks exactly the same as the one that appeared in final stage initially. And we have the owner here. 今日来て運転させてもらってありがとうございました。じゃあ自己紹介お願いします。
自分は鈴木と申します。この車を買った経緯ですね。イニシャリティっていうものがスアニメが大好きで買ったんですね。でやっぱりみんなハッチバックがやっぱ人気なので、じゃあ自分はちょっとクーペで行ってみようかなと思って、クーペも大好きなんですよ。なのでじゃあクーペでやってみようと思って。
なるほどね。もともとイニシャリティ以外前とかどうやって車が好きになったんですか？
どうやって、昔はそんなに興味はなかった
好きになってから、どうやって車の知識とインフォメーションを調べたんですか？
そうですね、知識、例えば自分の、この86なら、いろいろなんか調べていって、なんかそのスペックとか、やっぱ部品とか、どういうものがあるのとか、どうやったら速く走らせるかとか、どういういいものを奏でられるかとか、やっぱいろいろなんか見ていくうちに、なんか自然と知識がついた、っていう感じです。
大体ネットのホームページとかそういう
ネットもそうですけども、本でもやっぱ本の方が
そうですね、
なんだろうな、ネットよりかは詳しく書いてあることもありますし、そういうすごい情報、裏の情報なんかとかやっぱ小さく掲載されてますんで、もし一応古い、車ならやっぱ本読んだなんか知識は格別につきますので、
YouTube は見てますか？
YouTube はそうですね、ベストモータリング、
やっぱりベースモータリングね、ホットバージョンとかで、
昔のビデオ、土屋圭一さん、そうですね、86でガンガン飛ばしていく姿がかっこいいなと、すごいかっこいいです。
そうですよね。私ってことあります。やっぱり車が見た目がすごいなんですけど、やっぱり高いですよね。
高いですね。
高いですね。本当にファンが好きな車じゃないと買えないですよ。
300万だと、そうですね、やっぱり維持するのもだんだん大変になってきますし、やっぱ86っていう車だからやっぱどっかしら壊れますよね。
そうですね。
必ずも
問題でしょう。ティンティンなってる80でなる車の雰囲気だ。すごい。あれ外国人好きですよこれ。
好きなんですか？
日本しかないのこのがマジで。Wow. So coming to the end of our review of the AE111 Corolla, we're going to ask this hard question. Minus the initial D hype, minus the initial D tax of the AE86, is the AE111 with its very able front-wheel drive suspension setup the best and final edition of the 4A-GE? You have racing technology put into it, high cost for the engine with Yamaha technology. Is it worth it? Which would you actually buy? The AE86, while being very iconic in its heritage and its shape, is actually quite an old car. The technology and the suspension parts and the basic design was carried over from the 70s. Live rear axle, body rigidity is not that great. The engine doesn't actually have a lot of horsepower. It's not really that fast, while it being fun. On the circuits or on the road, the AE111 is a way more capable car, despite it being a front-wheel drive. Let's say they were the same price, which would you actually buy? So this is the question that I leave to you guys. Let us know in the comments. We at JDM Masters, we do appreciate these old 90s cars, and we hope that more people can appreciate it for what it really is. So let us know in the comments again, what are the cars you'd like us to review? More Toyotas, maybe an MRS, maybe a Celica, whatever. And that's all from us. Until next time, peace out.